Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asad Lalji. Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. Please refer to the chat box for more information on Avid Learning and our partners for this discussion. Avid Online was launched on the 1st of April 2020 in a direct response to the pandemic, and now 19 months and over 280 programs later, we continue to champion and bring to our audiences the very best of the arts and culture, staying true to our mantra, as always, that learning never stops. Music has always been the soul of our curatorial philosophy. And since we're not able to welcome you into the Royal Opera House physically since the pandemic, we've been curating and presenting programs across the breadth of the performing arts and presenting them through our platform, Avid Online. Tonight, we're delighted to present a new series, Across Cultures. What makes the fusion of such disparate music forms like Indian and Western classical music even conceivable? Music is a language deeper than words. And while Indian classical music can be improvised as desired by the performer, the Western counterpart is strictly composed like a straight-cut diamond. The two are contradictory in the spirit, and yet when combined, they stir us. This series will look at different paradigms of extraordinary exchanges of culture and tradition. We're delighted to present this four-part series with our partners, the Indian Music Experience Museum, Furtados, and the Royal Opera House, Mumbai. And this brings me to our evening session, Across Cultures, Ragas in Western Consciousness, a discussion that will examine the nuances of fusion music, the challenges to find a common ground to create a new piece, and the potential of these cross-disciplinary blends. Allow me to introduce this evening's speakers. Musician, composer, and sitar player, Hidayat Husain Khan. Musician and composer, Greg Hatza. Musicologist, musician, and co-founder, Melodic Intersect, Enayat Hussain. Singer, producer, songwriter, Amit Interdeo. Gosh, I feel like I'm at the Grammys. And they will be in conversation with founder and creative head, also ideas, content, and design, Alleyah Asghar. For more about our very accomplished panel, please refer to the chat box for their detailed bios. These should have also been emailed to you earlier. These stalwarts will explore the canvas of creating fusion music and the degree of discipline needed to perfect the harmony. They will speak about their genre-defying work on blending Indian classical music with Western music. Please note, the session is 90 minutes, which includes a 15-minute Q&A, and Alleyah will be taking questions submitted by the audiences. So do keep them posted in the Q&A section throughout. Also, please note that in this presentation, there will be a short pre-recorded performance shared towards the end of the discussion. So do stay logged on towards the end. And on that note, thank you once again for tuning in. Over to you, Alleyah, to level set and look forward to a fascinating session. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. Good evening and good morning to those sitting across the seas from here. Hi Hidayat, hi Enayat, hi Amit, hi Greg. So good to have you all here. Much has already been said by Asad about fusion, but when you look at the word fusion itself, what is defined in the dictionary is really two unique ideas coming together to form a third identity, which is equally unique and delightful. It can be applied to food, it can be applied to politics, it could be applied to science, and here in the context of music, I'm delighted to now talk to these lovely artists sitting in this chat room about their experience and how they met and what they create and what they know of fusion as a genre itself. And here's my opening question, an intriguing one actually. How the four of you come from such diverse worlds of music. I mean, Hidayat comes from a lineage of classical sitar. There's Greg who comes from the lineage of jazz piano. You've got Enayat from tabla, and you've got Amit from classical music as well. How did the four of you get together? What sparked this grouping? What happened?
Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, and it's so always a pleasure to be chatting with you, Alleyah, or Asad, and we've had such great times and such great conversations. So I hope this one will also make one of those. Inayat and I go centuries back. We, I think, met 87 or 89. We were just little kids. Our fathers sort of connected with each other, and thus we were connected. And it was an instant love affair, I can say. So that was just that old story. I mean, and we've had such great moments, and we used to also live in Baltimore at that time, very close to Enayat's home. So we would spend pretty much every day many hours together, fooling around or practicing, or getting scolded by my father or his father, or one of those things. So there's a long history. He's absolutely my family. He's my brother. And then through Enayat, I met Greg and Amit, and it was again one of those things that you meet them, and they're such fabulous musicians, fabulous people, and for some reason the connect was instant on a musical level, on a personal level, and I guess the rest is history.
Enayat, I'd like to bring you in to tell us a little about your experience with discovering Amit. Because I think
Sure.
yeah,
Amit's not gonna like it, but I'm gonna say it anyways, because he actually called me in the beginning of when Facebook started. Not too much was like images and all that stuff, but we connected, and he's like, hey, so he called me up and he's like, hey bro, I want you to do this album. And he had a very kind of urban kind of way of saying things. So he started talking to me. I thought he was a rapper. So he started talking to me.
Also,
he's like, yo, I want you to do this bhajan. I want you to do this track. So I was like, all right, send the track to me. I really thought he was somebody else. I mean, he was a producer wanting me to do a recording. So I did the recording. I sent it to him. It was so nicely done. The bhajan was beautiful, and pronunciation was clear. Bahut saaf tha. And then, so I called him up after that. I'm like, yo, who's the guy? Who's the dude singing the bhajan? And he's like, yo, it's me. I'm like, no, it's not. I'm like, yeah, it's me. I'm like, all right. So then I invited him to a festival. We my organization does a 3-day music festival. We've been doing it for like 30 years. So I invited him. I told my dad, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna invite him. He's gonna do our inaugural thing. He's gonna, because he told me he could do ghazal. I didn't know whether he could do actually ghazals or not. But I brought him. He was brilliant, actually. Then I told Hidayat, I'm like, yo, you gotta meet this guy. He's a hip hop guy stuck in an Indian classical music body. So his soul is Indian classical music. Outwardly, he's hip hop. So that's how we actually met.
That's the definition of fusion itself.
There you go. That's perfect fusion.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. This was, I think, just diverse people coming together is what makes creating art even more delightful. Hidayat, it'll be lovely to know from all of you actually, how have we all absorbed fusion without being aware of it, or having been aware of it? So for instance, when somebody says fusion to me, my thought goes straight to say Shakti with El Shankar and John McLaughlin. I mean, that's like the classical fusion that one remembers. What do you think how we've absorbed fusion? I mean, how far back does it go? Are we even aware that there was fusion in our lives before we really became aware of a genre called fusion?
See, I think somewhere along the line we've boxed things just to make sense of them. So I want to box you in a certain way. I want to box something else in another way, and then I'm happy about it. So we've boxed fusion in this specific sort of a way, which I feel it's not. Um, Growing up for me, when I was 3, we were in the US for a bunch of years, and then I went back to India. Plus, my father was very sort of into exposing me to different cultures, foods, music, and even if he wasn't, I mean, the fusing of minds, fusing of culture, fusing of like how we, like Enayat was describing Amit. I mean, and for that matter, any of us, we are so sort of influenced by things around us that I think it's a very natural process to want to mix the two. The closest relationship I find is with food. You know, you take one item and then you add salt to it, and you're like, this tastes like this, and then you add a little black pepper to it, and you're like, oh, this has got a little kick to it now. You know, so it's that kind of a thing, and fusion music has been happening since centuries, if you think about it in that way, because I
Wow.
mean, our music started from the Vedas, which was for chanting, and it still exists the same way even today. Um, like, if I like, I mean, most of the chanting happens in 3 notes. It's da 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 da. You know, so just imagine that from how many centuries ago, it's still existent in exactly the same way. And India being such an interesting country because of all the influences that we had. There was a lot of Islamic influence that came into the music. Then there was a lot of Western influence that came into music, architecture, food. So fusion has been happening from day one. Khayal is a fusion. Thumri is a fusion. Two rags put together is a fusion. What my father did, he's called, people boxed him into being somebody who was not into fusion, but he actually was very much into fusion music. He created an instrument that can not just replicate the voice, but it doesn't require, I mean, it's a complete instrument, because in every culture, the epitome of music has always been vocal music. But now here's the sitar, the way he created his style, he created now, it's a full, complete instrument. So fusion has been happening in Bollywood. I mean, I think is hugely responsible for the fusion that we know it right now, because it had orchestration, and the major difference basically between that Greg will explain to you further, because I mean, he's a master at that, is Indian classical music has a linear sort of improvisation structure, whereas Western music has a harmonized structure. So if you understand that little sort of thought process behind it, then the academic or the aesthetic of it comes more beautifully. But I think we all are fused and confused and
So
refused. Yeah.
you mean to say in the Bollywood structure of things, while ideally it should have been just vocals and accompanied by a few Indian instruments, the fact that we had violins and the piano and all sorts of orchestration happening is what would take it into the fusion genre.
No, I think again, I mean, again, we're boxing fusion, right? So we're saying that it has to have Western instruments, or it has to have a Western influence. I think fusion is just getting two things together. Our conversation is a fusion. I mean, language is completely fusion. हम लोग अंग्रेजी में बात करते हैं, then we don't have the words for it, then we find another language to talk in. So Bollywood just brought in the orchestration in a very significant way, and the harmonies in a very significant way. It even sort of took melodies from the West and sort of Indianized them, and were really inspired by them. Through decades, this has been going on. So Bollywood sort of took it in that direction of fusion, and we sort of, and then, as you said, Shakti. I mean, one of my favorite pieces of music has been done by Pandit Hariprasad Chaurasia with the French Philharmonic. It's just seamless and it's just beautiful. But then again, the thing about music is what appeals to me personally may not appeal to anyone else. Even within all of us, within the melodic intersect group, there are a lot of pieces of music that one of us attaches more to than the other person. We're such like-minded people, but we still have sort of a difference in how it hits us.
Let's bring Greg in to hear a little more about the structure or the science of the musical structures that you were talking about. Greg.
Yes.
Can we have you on? Yeah. Hi.
Hi. Yeah. Let me just give you a little bit about my background a little bit. I started piano like around 4 or 5 years old. There was a piano in my house, and my mother, I was improvising at the piano very young. I come from a Greek American background where my grandparents came from Asia Minor. And so I listened to all kinds of Middle Eastern, Turkish, Greek recordings all my life. So I'm very familiar with that type of sound. In the meantime, they also had a lot of early jazz recordings, which I listened to. Which once I listened to that, something bit me, and I don't know what it was, but I became just so enthralled with improvised music, also, which jazz is, and so I kept buying recordings of jazz musicians, listening, blah, 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 And also in the meantime, I also, playing piano. They didn't teach jazz. You had to almost learn it by yourself or by watching other musicians, and, because there was no system at that time. So I studied also structured Western classical piano. I did that, and went to during my studies at around 16 years old, I started playing professionally jazz organ, actually, with older jazz musicians who heard me play and they wanted me in their group. And so I started playing professionally, say between 15 and 16 years old, and continued till today. In the meantime, I also studied Western classical music. I went to the Peabody Conservatory and graduated in composition, and I also studied classical piano. So my influence in Indian music, as I mentioned a while back, started in the 60s from Woodstock. When Ravi Shankar came here, I seen the performance, and I just fell in love with Indian music. Okay, so I bought all his recordings. Everything I could find, I bought, So, because it was improvised music, and I played it improvised music in a different way, but we're all improvising, right? So in jazz, the improvisation, in Indian music, the improvisation is, is based on the beat, like 16 beat, 8 beat, 7 beat. That's very important. You have to keep that very strict, In jazz, the structure of a song is maybe divided into what they call measures, okay? And usually an average song may be 16 measures long. So when the jazz musician improvises, in the beginning, they took a lot of songs from old movies, those themes from movies, and they use that as a structure to improvise off of. So what happens is as the measures move, harmony changes, which harmony means the chords change as they move along. So the jazz musician has to follow the structure of the song with the harmony, just like the Indian musician has to follow the structure of the beat, always has to be correct. Jazz musician also has to be very correct on following the length of the song with the harmony. So as a chord changes, you know, in the song, it's a little bit different than Indian music in a sense that the scale also changes with the chord. So we have to keep moving between one scale and another scale to make it sound very nice. You know, we have to keep changing the scales with the harmony, and we have to be very correct. The song, if it's 16 measures long, as soon as the 16th measure comes around, we have to go back to the first. Just like in Indian music, when the 16 beats come up, they got to go right back to the first immediately. You know, there's no leeway there. You know, so we follow the structures of the song, but the difference is usually the scales change with the harmony. There's not like one rag or one that can fit the whole song all the time. You know, you have to change. And that's basically.
Does then the marriage of two different sounds become easy, or is that a challenge?
Well, what happened was with a lot of jazz musicians who followed that traditional structure in the 60s, they start with the influence of Indian music coming in, you know, which was compositions basically built on one or two scales, you know. John Coltrane, very famous, the jazz historical jazz musician. He got very involved with his wife, Alice Coltrane, Alice Coltrane was into Indian spiritualism and music. When she married John Coltrane, he also got involved with Indian spiritualism and music. So at that point, he even studied with Ravi Shankar because he wanted to know what is the structure of the Indian music, you know, so he could put it into his own style, you know. He was very interested in, I think it's called Raza. Is that the term?
Raza Khani?
Huh?
Raza Khani?
Where everything, like daytime, nighttime has a different vibration, different scale.
Oh, Rasa.
Yeah, Rasa. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He was very interested in that, you know, and unfortunately, he wanted to continue to study with Ravi, but he died in 1967, 68, and he couldn't do it. He wanted to be his student. But in the meantime, he did a lot of recordings, even named some India, you know, and like things that had to do with consciousness, you know, and universal love and stuff. And so he even did things that looked like the structures of Indian music, like an Alleyah, but he did it in a jazz way, an Alleyah, you know. And also his music, he also just played on one scale or one tonal system, like Indian music, you know. He just played the whole composition, sometimes 25 minutes long, you know, he played,
wow.
You know, and all the guys that improvised, the bass player played, just like what we're doing kind of in melodic instrument, Intersect, bass player play a bass line on, say, for instance, in a melodic instrument, the Sitar's tune a lot in the key of D. So the bass player would play, you know, notes on the D, like the Sapa, something like that, you know, mix it up, you know, and John Coltrane would do a composition on that scale, on this particular scale, and he would improvise forever, you know. So at that time, they used a lot of the influence of the Indian music and the forms. Alice Coltrane, his wife, actually started to use tambura in her music and some tabla players, you know. So the early jazz musicians didn't use too much of Indian instrumentation, but later it became that way. Then they would add a tabla player to a piece, you know, or a tambura, right? You know, and she would play a harp and play only one rag, you know, on the harp, you know. So it kind of developed like that in the jazz world, in the jazz world, you know. Then I would say they didn't really like understand, I would say, the nature of Indian improvisation in a sense, as if you know, unless you would study them, you had to study the music, which I did. You see, I studied Indian music, so you know, a lot of times they would just put an Indian instrument performer in the group and gives it that sound. You know, the sound you can hear the Indian sound with the Western sound. You know, but I don't think too many of them really like try to study deeply into the Indian theory, musical theory. You know, I don't, maybe
I mean,
John
this is
McLaughlin.
exactly what we also do. I mean, a lot of times we will take a guitarist and add to our group, and think that we're actually understanding what they're doing, but no, we're just using sound. But interestingly, now, at least from an Indian perspective, from the 60s to now, what has happened is that I haven't gone anywhere and played an Indian classical music concert where the audience didn't know what I was doing, like, very well. The audience has become so knowledgeable with exposure and these kind of, you know, works of these kind of musicians, that it's really made it easy for us, because we don't have an audience that is an alien audience anymore. We have an audience that knows exactly what we're doing and understands the subtle nuances. And I guess that's a contribution of fusion.
True.
Hey, by the way, I just want to add to that. That's an absolute truth, because I mean, I'm one of the voters in the Grammy Awards. So last year we had I had an album which featured the Vichitra Veena, which is a really old instrument, ancient instrument, in fact. So we're allowed to talk to each other, the voters, at the Recording Academy. So I sent out this album to a lot of voters, and and they're all Western musicians, by the way. 90% of the Recording Academy members are Western musicians, probably 10% from outside. But every one of them, not one of them did not know that instrument. I mean, we're talking about like 200, 300 voters at the least. Every one of them knew exactly what the Vichitra Veena is, exactly what kind of music they were playing. It's more like a Drupad Ang than Khayal. Yeah. And they were like superbly, I mean, they were like, I didn't even have to explain it, because my introductory sentence when I was sending them the press kit was, you know, this is an ancient, when I was chatting online, this is an ancient, oh, you don't have to, I mean, everybody would be like, oh, no, we know the Vichitra Veena. You don't have to tell us about it. So Indian music right now versus 40 years ago, like what Ravi Shankar and Vilayat Khan Sahab and all these people, what they faced, we have it 1,000 times easier, because now Indian music, everybody knows. At least if they don't know the theory, they know the sound. They know what it is. And they really, I'm talking about classical music. They really respect the art form, in fact.
That's in fact, there's a question when you talk about respect. There's a question from an attendee who I'm sorry has refused to name themselves. This is for the Hidayat, where somebody wants to know: do issues of respect of style come in while trying to incorporate another form?
And very interesting question. I mean, it can be a very deep question. I mean, I think. Music, unfortunately, with musicians, they look at music or an instrument that they play as something that is different than their personal self. So if you allow yourself to play the music that is coming from your heart, then you should hopefully respect yourself, so you respect the art. And if you don't respect yourself, then obviously you don't respect your art. So then that becomes easy. The integration of that becomes easy. In terms of discipline, is where it becomes where you need to sort of get a handle on, because my training, my upbringing, my roots are Indian classical music. So, so I never believe that you can fuse any kind of formed research music, because that is Indian classical music. Even if it's jazz, right? It has to be that. So if you're fusing music, you're just fusing music. It's not rag darbari or this or that. You can take inspiration from different rags, different genres, but you're fusing the music, and you're fusing it in such a way that you are comfortable with. I'm comfortable wearing the clothes that I'm wearing. I will walk a certain way. If I'm wearing clothes that are not fitting me right, then I'm uncomfortable, or it's just not, it just doesn't jive with you. So it's very important to be comfortable in your own skin.
So when you talk about comfort, the question that pops in is, when you're so familiar and so focused on your classical education, I mean, does that make it easier for you to then deliver something which is an offshoot of that, but not necessarily the pure form? Does that work in your favor?
So if your foundation is laid properly, right? People talk about, there's a lot of talk in the music world, don't copy someone, be your individual. That is a natural process, right? So if your foundation is strong, and your identity is built, then whatever you do, I will do it as a Hidayat Khan. And like we were, initially we were joking about Amit. I mean, we were saying that Amit has this urban rapper personality, but he's an amazing ghazal singer with pronunciation, and he has an Indian classical singer as well. But he is who he is, and in his skin, in his being, it's natural to him. Now, if I try to pretend to be him, or talk like him, or everything, it just won't jive. So if you're comfortable in your own skin, and if you're sort of you need to be happy with that. You have to be sort of happy with yourself, and then the music just lends itself.
Amit, let's get you in and hear you tell us a little about your own classical foundation, and what is it that you expect the young musicians to say? There's a question for you as well on the Q&A bit while we've been talking. What is the one thing that you would like to tell the young musicians of today, and what they must do in order to pursue their passion?
I think the only advice that I could probably give to upcoming musicians or young musicians, even musicians today, old and young, is don't confine yourself in the box. I think part of fusing music is having the understanding of other genres, right? And listening to other genres, and just kind of testing the waters of it. You don't have to necessarily, I love listening to hip hop music. I love listening to reggae music. I love listening to jazz. I love listening to country music, whatever it is. I'm a music lover, right? But I also know what I love to do. I'm very intrigued, and I love to sing classical music and ghazals and all these things. That's what I love to do. However, being brave and incorporating all these different sounds and flavor, I always tell people, and even Hidayat, as long as it feels good, let's do it. It has to feel good, like he said. How you tailor yourself as a person should be how you tailor your music, right? You have to look good, and you have to feel good with what you're wearing, right? So music is the same thing. For my whole mantra, as long as it feels good, let's do it. It doesn't matter what genre it is, it has to feel good. Or else then there's, what are we doing?
Enayat, there's a question here for you as well. What are some of the challenges you face while creating fusion?
Challenges. I mean, I think sometimes what happens is musicians. I think all musicians will identify with that. Is that you kind of lose your way, kind of trying to get mass appeal, and being the next big thing. So I mean, challenges is not like outside interference. It's within yourself. Challenges is okay, I need like 1 billion hits on this music. Right now, the world is so crazy with likes and hits and Facebook. I mean, sometimes I feel that's like a regressive element in music in itself, because everybody's
pandering to popularity and not pandering to your own heart.
Kind of, because that I think that a lot of musicians, that's their singular focus. That I want, and I mean, I'm not going to say who it is, but I've seen a lot of insanity. I mean, people are just doing music for the hell of. I mean,
it's noise.
And superb musicians, like top musicians, they'll get together and like they'll put something out that. I mean, me and Hidayat, we discuss music all the time, in fact, and we're like, what the hell is he thinking? What drugs is he on? I mean, it's not the capability. The capability is there for musicians. I think every musician, whether it be up here or down here, levels we categorize them, but every musician, no matter how good or bad they are, I mean, I didn't say bad, how experienced or inexperienced they are, they're all great. Because if you can satisfy one person, whether it's 10,000 or one, if you can satisfy one person, you're good. I consider you a musician. The problem I have is when people like do stupid music. I mean, it's not music. It's nonsense. Like, and you can definitely tell. I think because I look at the YouTube comments, they're brutal, and I feel bad for that. But I laugh like crazy. I'm like, well, this guy, that he tried to do this for mass appeal, and then there's 1,000 YouTube comments. Ustad ji kya keh raha hai? Kya kar raha hai? Kya ho raha hai yahan? So,
and I will contradict you on that. Yeah, on the YouTube comment bit, or social media commenting. I mean, nowadays people have access to social media or these platforms, and they don't have any skin on the game, and they
Anonymity really
comment.
helps.
Yeah, and to get 2 seconds of glory time, they will comment like really idiotic, stupid stuff on things that are completely not relevant.
That's true. That's true. But I mean, lastly, I just want to say that challenges wise, I'm very fortunate. I cannot say I have any challenges.
So you have your favorites now?
No, it's the thing is that I've been fortunate enough in my life to work with my friends. Like, these are all my friends, and I've known them for years. So if I come up with something, I tell Hidayat, hey, yo, this is what we need to do. Hidayat doesn't ask me, he'll tell me. He's like, oh, dude, not this way, this way. Can we do it this way? I'm like, yeah, man. I mean, I think one thing about everybody, including Greg, because Greg is a master. He's not in our level. He's a maestro. I mean, ustad, if I can say that.
Sensei,
yeah. Shifu, sensei. I mean, the thing is that you will never find, and I swear to God, I'm not making this up, or I'm not just being, saying this for people. When we get together, there's no egos. Hidayat is he's a son of Ustad Hidayat Khan. It's a big thing. But there's no egos on stage. If we don't like something, we're like, we're not doing this. And then everybody will like, okay, we're not doing this. So challenges, like, I think musicians face challenges, especially when they when they're composing and stuff, when they have people who are not willing, who have egos in their group. This is why 90% of the groups break up.
Right.
I have this, I'm better here, you're better here, blah, blah, stay in your pocket. But that's not true. Me being a tabla player, I still tell Hidayat, yo, dude, this doesn't sound right. These notes over here doesn't sound right. That's preposterous. A lot of musicians, a lot of melody players will look at me and say, what the hell are you thinking? Stick to your own instrument. Stick to tal.
Can
But
I
because
add?
I know, I have somewhat of an understanding of rags, and because I mean, I play another instrument. That's why when we have discussions, it's not a problem. So I'm very my final thing is I'm very, very blessed that I work with only musicians that I actually like, and I tend to do that on purpose. I don't actually like playing with people I don't have a connection with.
That's true for a lot of art that gets put together. I mean, you have to have that ability to really gel. Now, Greg, I mean, you have these three guys who come from a really strong Indian classical background, and you yourself have studied so much. How does then there's a question here in that respect. How do you create a new composition while respecting both the schools of music? So you come from a. Sorry?
Say the question again. Say the question again.
The question is that has come again on the Q&A is, how do you create a new composition while respecting both the schools of music? In this group, you are three Indian classical hardcore legacies sitting here, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I studied Indian music with Enayat's father for 20 years, okay, tabla and sitar. So my thing was, if I'm going to understand this music, I need to study it. That's the way I am. And when I decide, I go hardcore. I study Indian music, like I say, almost 20 years. But I'm still learning Indian music, from Hidayat and Enayat, But in the meantime, I have to, when I write a composition, I have to understand also the instruments that I'm playing with. I have to respect the sitar and what the So when I compose a composition, still following either rag or rag, whatever, and I will put then jazz harmonies to kind of follow the melody that I write for say, if I decide to play a certain melody, I will put jazz harmonic nuances that will match what he's doing, Then, of course, then Night will add his rhythmical ideas. We kind of always still talk about things. If things don't feel right, Hidayat might say, maybe this chord should be here, and okay, no problem. There's no ego in these us three. We're trying to make something happen. And if something's not happening right, somebody make a suggestion. Fine, I'll make an adjustment. So basically, like I say, I write compositions. Always try and keep the sitar in mind, because it's one of the main melodic instruments in this group. So I will add my knowledge of harmony and try and make it sound like a beautiful composition when it's completed. That's it.
There's a request. Sorry, Hidayat, you were saying.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the easiest things and the most beautiful thing in our group is that we're all very good listeners. And when we record, especially Melodic Intersect, because and I'll give credit to Enayat for this, because he's insistent on doing it in a live setting where all of us are sort of sitting in one place and we're doing it. It's a nightmare sometimes, post-production and all of that stuff. But when it comes together beautifully, because we sort of feed off energy from each other. We hear each other, what we did, and we play off of that. inspired from that. So there's a conversation, and like there's a link in the conversation that goes from the beginning to the end. Very interesting thing about instrumental music, which is very different than other forms of, and especially improvised instrumental music, is when you watch a movie, you get the script, you get the actors, you get the location, you know exactly what you're watching. There's very little one needs to do in terms of imagination. As different art forms sort of, the more audience interaction sort of comes into play. With theater, there's a little bit more imagination. With dance, there are the mudras and things that tell you what the story is. With vocal music, there are genres. Qawwali, you're supposed to feel like this. You can hear the lyrics. Bhajan, you're supposed to feel like this. Khayal, you know, but with instrumental music, we're not giving you any kind of script. So in our mind, that conversation needs to be so strong and so clear that you as a listener can understand exactly what we're talking about. It's not just a bunch of notes together. And we actually have a conversation. Recently, myself and Amit did a concert, and Amit wanted to sing a ghazal, and we said, yeah. And the way his ghazal, and we were hearing the recording later, and we're like, oh, this is interesting, because the way I played with his ghazal was to add to that conversation. So we're constantly listening to each other. With Enayat, the 90% of our conversations are about melody, and as he was saying, that he will correct me. He corrects me all the time. All the time. I mean, he will talk to me about rags, he'll talk to me about tonality, he'll talk to me about aesthetics. So it's not just a conversation. Same goes with Greg, same goes with Amit. I mean, the last song, again, we did with Amit was something that when he sent me the scratch for it, he said, I want you to do this. I was like, it didn't fit in my head. But there's so much trust with each other right now that we go in and we'll pursue the idea. And it turned out to be one of the most fun songs that I've done in the recent times, you know.
Is it possible to hear something? Is it possible to hear, Hidayat, the track that you just spoke of?
Yeah, the Rag Steady track,
Rag
I think,
Steady.
or any track. I mean, you will see the synergy in any of the tracks. Whatever Sagar you have, if you want to play something, that'll be great.
Sagar, I
Cue it
think
up.
it'd be fun to really hear something that these people have produced, because I think with so much that has been said about the music and about the synergy that they talk about.
You know what, Sagar, is it possible? Sorry, if I didn't.
Okay. There it is.
Okay, that's fine. But if we can hear Anjane Raste, because the interesting thing is with Anjane Raste, it's a track that we honestly don't know who composed.
Wow.
Because it was Amit's composition, or it was my composition, or it was Enayat's composition. We honestly don't know, because we all added so much to it. And it doesn't really matter who creates it. That's what happens with us. It really doesn't matter who did it, because we all, whether Greg creates a composition, but we all own it, because like it's ours, you know.
As long as it sounds good.
अनजान रास्ते अनजान लोग अनजान रास्ते अनजान लोग कोई नहीं जाने मुझे कोई पहचाने ना दिल में है तू बसी जान में है तू बसी सांसों में तू बसी ख्वाबों में
That was really lovely, and I must mention this to Gyan Prakash, who's one of the attendees, and a couple of other people who have requested to listen to some of the music that all of you have produced. So great. There's another question, not a question actually, a comment from Rajiv Raja, which says, as individuals, we are a product of a multitude of influences, but express ourselves as one composite persona. Similarly, fusion music must flow from the unified soul rather than strive to put disparate elements together. Agree or disagree?
Yeah.
Agree.
Fully agree.
Agree, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, he's put
Check
it so
mark.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, totally. For Greg, there's a little bit of history on Greg over here. Somebody's really studied Greg's biography, I suppose. You've studied Chinese classical music. Are there any similarities with the Indian classical, between Chinese and Indian classical music?
Okay. Like I say, when I'm interested in something, I go right into it. I was interested in Chinese music also.
He had a Chinese girlfriend.
I don't know. Anyways, so I just like Indian music, I need to study an instrument, then I can understand. So I studied the erhu, which is a 2-string bowed instrument that Chinese use. You know, I think it's not an original Chinese instrument. I guess it was an instrument that came from another country. I think, you know, like a lot of things. You know, and I studied the guzheng, which is kind of the zither of the Chinese. Anyways, the difference is there's a big difference because Chinese classical music does not have a lot of space for improvisation. It's pretty structured. You know. So at that time, I even tried to do a fusion of jazz and Chinese music with a few Chinese musicians at the time. You know, so they have a hard time just playing something in improvisation because they're not structured that way. Their classical music is not structured. It's pretty much written out, and they follow notes. They don't change too many things. Only like nuances that the instrument might do. But as far as improvisation, I studied with pretty good high-level classical Chinese musicians, you know, and so improvisation was not really a part of their musical structure as in Indian music and jazz. So
I hope that answers your question, the anonymous attendee who's asked us that. Now, I'd also like to, I mean, I think the last few weeks that we've been interacting with each other, it was interesting to know, you know, about instruments that are not, that are of different origins and have become a part of another culture altogether. Hidayat, remember we were talking about the harmonium.
Yeah.
And the
harmonium, the violin.
Yeah, Enayat, Hidayat, Amit, I'd like to hear from all of you what are the instruments that we assume were a part of of our culture and tradition and are not really so.
Harmonium first, by the way. I've actually seen harmonium like from the 18th century. I think I must have been 18th or 19th century. Somebody brought it in. And I've actually seen that. The only difference is it had bellows also, but it was also electric. But it was exactly looked like a harmonium, as in today's harmonium in India, in fact.
I mean,
it had the bellow system
it's sort of
and an electric
accordion influenced it, and so many harmonium sort of developed, but it's not an Indian instrument.
No,
it's a
dude,
Western
bro.
instrument, yeah.
Harmonium in Germany, as far as I know, harmonium came first, then came the accordion and all these kind of things.
Oh,
in fact,
wow.
Harmonium predates all of that, as what I've seen, what I've read, if that's real.
Well, the guitar has been taken into
totally.
Indian this thing we've even added sympathetic strings and so many changes. Violin has become such a big part of our repertoire. And then there are instruments like flute, which I don't know where they're universal, I guess. And so many instruments. I mean, I'm sure there are a dozen instruments that we're sort of forgetting, names of. I think Amit is Googling and researching.
Yeah, Amit, I'd like to get you in. You've been silent for a while.
Sure. I'm enjoying this. Hold on, let me plug in real quick. My laptop is dying. Yeah, I'm enjoying, listening to these guys. They have good insight on music. I always do.
Okay, so then we must also notice the difference between this rap accent voice versus the voice that we'll hear soon, which is not going to be like this, right?
I'll tell you something. I don't know where this rapping thing comes from, but Enayat today, he must have said yo way too many times today.
That's true. That's true.
But again, it goes back to my parents were very open on us listening to different music. I mean, we grew up here in New York and in Florida, and my dad learned to play the tabla just so he can teach his sons to play, right? And I think that's where the stem from Indian classical music started with me. I think I started like 7, but I think I always was fascinated with how cool would it be, or how would that sound? And it's always the same thing when Hidayat and I sit down and talk music. It's like, well, what if you did this? Or well, what if you sang, what if you sang like this? Well, what if we do this reggae thing, and instead of me singing sargam or any type of, khayal or whatever, what if I do some reggae? What would that be like? And you're playing sitar. And then let's get some tabla. Well, what would that sound like? Well, how much tabla? Not too much, or not, or not too much, so that, the conversation is always about balance, but it's always about bravery. All right, let's be brave. Hidayat, you're going to play some sitar on a reggae track.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's ever been done, but, we tried it.
So do you think you'd like to attribute this bravery to the education you've had? Do you think
Absolutely.
without the education, would you dare to be this brave? Just a thought.
I don't think, and again, it goes back to knowing the genre, right? So like, in order to experiment, you have to first understand one complete thing, and then you start taking other elements from the outside and seeing if there's some type of blend or mixture. How does it work? Sometimes, when I'm composing, I may have an idea, or Hidayat may be over and he's playing some raga, and I may already have some melody in my head, and I may lay the melody down, but then maybe I want to do something in Bhageshwari, or maybe I want to do something in Nanda, whatever it may be. But then the whole thing somehow 90% of it doesn't, or let's say 70% of it doesn't works, right? But the 30% doesn't. So then we have to kind of bend it so where, it ended up turning out good. And that's usually the case. Every time we do something, it ended up turning out pretty all right. So that's rock steady.
Fabulous. But Amit, it'll also be interesting to know, what are your favorites? Is there a favorite that you have that you've been inspired by?
Genre?
No, a fusion track or a fusion album or an artist that you really always.
So I think the first time I've heard fusion music was, the late Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab. And then I heard that was very in your face fusion, like, oh, it's so cool. What is that? This is the first time I've heard, gamak on a drum track, and then I heard an album. I think I was 15 years old, and I bought an album, Akash, Hariran. And then I heard this ghazal had pianos, tabla, drums. It was just everything. And I thought, to me, that was the most amazing thing I've ever heard in my life. And then as the years went on, and this is, I don't know, 1998, 97. And then as things moved along, everybody's starting to just wrap themselves around different, because in today's music, the sound is changing. If it's from a commercial standpoint, if it's not different, then it's not going to work, because the attention span to musicians and young musicians today, or even listeners rather, right? It's very short, so you have to hook them in the first 8 seconds of a track in order for them to listen to 30 seconds of it, right? And then eventually buy into it, right? So sound will always evolve. I think the next group of musicians, which, are coming up, I can't wait to hear what that's going to sound like, because it's going to be so different. There's going to be a lot more fusion. There's going to be, African musicians are doing it. Chinese musicians are doing it. Indian classical musicians are doing it. Western musicians are incorporating Indian classical music all the time. It's just, the sound is changing, and we have to change. We have to evolve with it. As musicians, you can't go against it. You have to go with it in order to evolve yourself, right? So, and again, like Enayat said, and just to piggyback, the most important thing about us is our relationship off stage, away from the music. I think the camaraderie and the respect amongst men, right, is super important to have. And then the ego check at the door is another thing, and that's why most groups, they split. I don't think a lot of guys understand how to ego check. And I'll tell you, and again, piggybacking off Enayat, Hidayat, it's not just any musician. There are folks that I know that they'll tell me, man, you're friends with Hidayat, and geek out. Oh, dang, dude, like, what's that like? I don't tell him this, but they're like, oh, what's
I'm
that
glad
like?
actually you don't.
What's it like to work with these guys? And but how he approaches music and his openness to share the knowledge to somebody who doesn't know, or somebody who's just a fan, or personalities and egos get in the way. Sometimes I'm afraid to meet some of my favorite musicians, because I'm like, oh man, they might have a personality that I don't like, and that would ruin it for me. I probably wouldn't even want to listen to the music anymore.
So true. So true.
But for him, I can say that I have a friend who in my eyes is a rock star, right? And a lot of people know it because they're like, oh man, dude, I'm geeking out, man. That dude's he's an awesome musician, And but I think, and I commend these guys for that. Even Enayat, and Greg, and I've known Greg for a little bit. And Enayat's a phenomenal musician, but these guys are truly my friends. And I hope, and I always tell them, listen, man, as long as we maintain our relationship off record, that's most important to me. I can walk away, not do music with you guys, but as long as our relationship remains, then it's worth it. And if that continues, and it will, let's make some music while we're doing it.
Great. That's such a great thought. Now this is a question open to all of you. You've been around for a reasonably long time, and you've seen the landscape, say, over the last 20, 30 years. What do you perceive would happen in the future? How do you compare it between the past and present?
Before anybody answers, I want to just say I'm the youngest in this group.
So not 20 or 30 years for you. But I'm sure in the last 5 years also, there's been a radical change, and you just mentioned it, where attention spans are shorter and so on. Greg, what do you feel about it? You've been around, your sensei Greg, so I think you'd be the most...
We got to add that to your bio now.
I've noticed that just that particular thing about attention spans, has definitely decreased. You know, when I was playing jazz back in the 60s, you know, we would play compositions sometimes 20 minutes, 25 minutes long, right? No, you can't do that. I mean, and at that time, jazz was pretty popular. You know, jazz is not all that popular, unfortunately, these days. You know, the audience has dropped. You know, small percentage. You know, sometimes I think jazz musicians did it to themselves too, because some of them refused to change. You know, and so you have some just wanted to keep playing the same way, but the audience is changing. You know, so the attention span average, unless somebody's around 70 years old, they remember that type of jazz. But a 20-year-old young kid coming up, they don't. Most of them don't even know what jazz is to begin with. You know, unfortunately, and it's probably what some people call the original American classical music is jazz. You know, everything came from jazz, rock, you know, blues, gospel. I mean, gospel came actually helped develop into jazz, but this jazz influence is in everything, you know. But the audience is very small, and the only jazz musicians that kind of kept going and actually did very well in the business are people who decided to change their music to what was happening now. For instance, Herbie Hancock, who played with Miles Davis, jazz keyboard player. Nobody knew who he was until he released an album called Chameleon, and that had urban beats, you know, and all of a sudden he became, say, example, a listener of 10% to a listener of 90%. You know, that's how much it grew. You know, and Miles Davis knew the same thing too. You know, he stopped playing traditional and he started going into things with more urban beats, more world beats. You know, different types of electronic music, and so the compositions also became shorter. You know, and it's just because the young people just don't have an attention span. They see music, they hear music all day long. You know, and most compositions, even to be played on a radio station, have to be under 5 minutes long. You know, just to get something played on the radio. So everything is being diminished.
You know, I have a slightly contradicting opinion to this. A lot of the times that we glorify our yesteryears, and that's nostalgia. We like to live in that and everything. They used to talk about packed auditoriums, people listening all night. I mean, did you ever ask the artist what was the size of that packed auditorium? There were maybe 100 people there at the maximum, right? Today, again, if I speak from my genre of music, which is Indian classical music, I'm living in America, and Enayat is living in America. We're playing across the globe. Could you imagine that 50 years ago? How many people knew Indian classical music? So I feel that music, the understanding of music, of the research form of music also has grown. But so has media and 24-hour news networks and things like that have grown to a level where we want sometimes the same popularity as popular music. It was never popular music. It was never meant for the masses. It was meant for a certain few who had developed it and acquired the taste to appreciate that kind of music. So I think speaking within genres and who you're catering to, there is obviously an audience today who is dying to listen to a good long alap in Rag Yaman or Rag Bihag or Bhageshri or anything. The problem is that as artists, are we delivering something that is in capturing them, that can hold them down? for an hour just by playing an alap. So it's not really an audience problem; it's a musician problem. In this last century, I think Indian classical music has had some of the greatest. It's reached its like epic stages, but now those people, now all of us are left to sort of follow their path, and eventually there'll be one of us or the next generation is again going to come out with another sort of evolution within the music. So evolution is always important. There is no one single method to it, and it'll keep on evolving. Indian classical music, jazz, Western classical music, whatever form of music will never die. It's here to stay, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's whatever, it's not going to crush it. We are here forever. I mean, there's the sound of the earth, so it can't go.
I have one interesting, very kind of interesting experience story. Our last album, Melodic Intersect, which was Looking Forward, was released in 2017. We charted like crazy. It was promoted on the radio, and we played some 400 radio stations throughout the United States. We ended up we charted #1 in the world music charts for about 30 to 40 weeks. Like, I think #1, and then we ended up with substantially higher following groups. I think we ended up overall for the year was #3 or #4 in the entire world, in the in radio. Mm-hmm. So real fast, while doing this, a radio station had wanted to interview us. So I'm like, okay, I'll take the interview. I took the interview. It was a station in Alabama, right? Wow. And so I was, the DJ was very nice. She was interviewing me, blah blah blah. At the end, we were basically talking about fusion and our concepts and the tracks. And she was very well versed in fusion music. So at the end, she's like, "Hey, Enayat, we want you to give advice to the young people, to the multitude of young people listening to you." So I'm like, yeah. Stay in school. Don't do music until you have a what do you call it, degree. Get the degree and then do the music. Have the degree as backup. So she was very happy. She's like, "Thank you so much. Blah blah blah. I'm gonna call you back." This was on air. When she called me back, I started thinking in my head, I'm like, who the hell am I actually talking to? Because I don't know anything about the station. So she's like, "Hey," so I'm like, "Hey," her name is Jenny. I'm like, "Jenny, what? Who am I talking to? Who's my demographics here? Who's your demographics?" He's like, "You don't know?" I'm like, "Nope." He's like, "Dude," he's like, "Yo, you have the #1 album in Alabama in a teen pop station." I mean, these guys are playing pop music, and I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, we got your record, and we decided, hey, let us just put this out there." See, we put it on rotation for 1 week, every day, right? He's like, "We got so much
traction there.
Traction. We kept you on, and that's one of the reasons why we charted so heavily. Because a very significant radio station, pop stations, and all these different stations have different kind of traction points." Mm-hmm. So I was telling her, I was like, "Wow, man, that's insane." Because Melodic Intersect, which is basically two of the 3 frontmen are Muslims, first of all, Indian Muslims playing Indian instruments. We're leading #1 in Alabama, southern pop station. So I'm like, you're totally not our demographics.
That sounds so delightful. Is there something from that album that we can hear over here now for people to know what
the chase, which you're going to play later, is from that album actually.
Sagar, do you think we can play that right now?
I think we're going to wrap up and then play two albums. Yeah?
Okay. I think there are a whole bunch of questions, and I think a lot of these questions have already been answered in the conversation as it flowed so naturally. There's somebody who wants to know, we all have to change wherever according to where the world is taking us. Kiran Holkar writes this. It says, how can we still stick to the history and to our lineage and to our culture and pass it on as
Support Indian musicians. Actually, very important thing right
Support
now.
us.
No, I'm not saying.
We're gonna start. Go.
No, wait. I'm not
GoFundMe
saying
right
it as
here.
a very selfish kind. I'm not saying it as a selfish kind of thing.
This
But
is a
listen to the old.
okay?
Yeah, don't listen to us. Listen to the old masters. Honestly, right now we're living in a time where there's so much music on YouTube. You can just pull these guys up who were musicians that, like 100 years ago. Their music is on YouTube. Listen to them, learn from them, and then come and critique us and come and listen to us too.
No, let's not get into the critique. But like people just need to chill and just need to enjoy. I mean, just don't get so uptight about how do we hold on. It's in our DNA. It is ours. Just just be yourself.
But I think
Cliche,
just
but it's true.
Just to interject real quick, but I think in order to still hold on to the actual rawness of Indian classical music, right? The style of the gaiki of that Hidayat Khan plays. I think it's important for guys like Hidayat, Enayat, Greg to continue to share that rawness of music with the younger generation, so they can, once they understand and they bite and they get a bite, they're going to continue to share it. So that's how the music will continue to live, or that richness of the actual sound will continue to live. Because anybody can play sa or sargam on the sitar, but there's just, in my opinion, and I'm not being biased because this guy's my friend, but there's just something about his sur that to me is just like, that was different. So if that knowledge continues to grow and he shares it and that person shares it, then that's where the richness of music or any classical music will continue to flourish, in my opinion.
Yeah, to now come into a more realistic environment where we've kind of dealt with the pandemic in the last 1.5 years, and we've all experienced a change in the way in the way we operate and the way we function and the way the world is going to now look at events happenings, especially where there is a crowd going to be congregating. How do you all see the future of events? And then there is attached to the same thought is Gyan Prakash's question, where he would like to know if there is a stage performance in the near future possible in India, especially in Jaipur.
Well,
you guys would be able to tell that. I'm down for it. I'm down for it. I think all these guys are down for coming to Jaipur and performing. I think the sporting events, at least in New York, and there's some big music gigs also that are happening that are packed, and people are getting vaxxed and masking up and taking precautions and everything. For our niche sort of genre of music, I think personally I don't enjoy performing in front of a camera. And I think Enayat completely agrees with me also on that, because our style of performing is very dependent on audience reaction. We actually we don't plan. A lot of times we plan things and we go onto the stage and we end up doing something totally different. Or especially in classical concerts, and I absolutely love playing with Enayat for that reason, is because where he does the tarif is one thing, but when he's playing and he's not playing a solo piece where he's accompanying, his teka will slightly just change at that moment, which will give me a completely new direction. Or his accent will happen when I'm doing something, right? This is not even a verbal cue. This is an audio cue, which will sort of get me in that sort of direction. So there's a lot of participation. The same way there's a lot of audience participation. So I think if we can come up with a hybrid system for musicians like us, where we stream to the world, but there is at least a few people in the audience that we can sort of connect and have a conversation with, that'd be great. I mean, that'd be awesome.
I just hope that happens, and I hope events come back for real, and this pandemic kind of shoos away quickly enough for us to get back together and be in a space where we can see you on stage and we can interact with you as with as much pleasure.
Yeah, I mean, this would be so much better if you were all sitting together and sipping some chais and samosas and having the same conversation.
At the Royal Opera House, if we must put a venue to.
Yeah,
yes, exactly.
absolutely. I mean, this is great. I mean, I'm thankful for technology, and at least we can do this. But there's just something about human connection. I mean,
Totally. To see somebody, to meet somebody's eye and to get that appreciation across, or that response across, is just so much necessary for any form of expression to really work well.
Yeah.
I think it's time, Asad. Sagar, is it time for us to wrap up, or should I?
No, it is. I think we still have the performances to play. But thank you so much, Alleyah, for being such a skillful moderator and keeping all these gentlemen in check. Great job.
Absolutely.
But you guys, thank you for sharing such insights. And I make copious phrases through the sessions of all my Avid Onlines, and we have so many of them. And I at the end, I like to can I pick few phrases from them. And one of them was, we are friends of Hidayat and we're geeking out. And I'd like to say the same. And we'd also like to thank Hidayat, because he's essentially the catalyst, has got this group together. And, I think I met Hidayat at Joe's Pub in New York, perhaps, if I have to.
Yeah, that's
go
right.
back and see where we actually met. But, working with friends and to see this bonding and camaraderie and creative exchange, it's so special. And it's such a wonderful way for us at Avid to launch this series. And you told us about this, and we started thinking, and we have a 4-episode series launched because of that. And we started looking at such constructs that kind of are so meaningful. And and a couple of things is, why confine yourself to a box when you don't need to? And I have so many, like, we're all playing, we're global souls right now, we're global citizens, everyone is. And yes,
Absolutely.
we all would like to be sitting in a room making eye contact, and until we can't, this is the next best alternative. And it is still, you're reaching a wide audience. You have over 350 people who register to come for these events, and which would be difficult to get in the real world, to be very honest. And thank you, guys. I mean, this has been a very meaningful conversation. Before we get into the two pieces we're going to play, which is Ragas Steady and Melodic Intersect, is I just want to thank our partners for the evening, because as I say at Avid, we just love working with partners, and I also joke, it's more logos the better, it looks prettier. But thank you to the Indian Music Experience Museum, Furtados. They're always such a gracious partner with us, and obviously the Royal Opera House. And honestly, we were joking the other day when we all spoke, but I think the next thing is we all going to be sitting at the Royal Opera House having this performance. Many of you all, Hidayat, you've been there, Alleyah, you've been there, but the rest, you're going to get there, and we'll have we'll make some music together.
Definitely.
But thank you guys for being part of it. Avid has many programs. Guys, please don't log off, tune off. You have the cherry on the icing is coming. Just wait, give me a second and check off the to-dos that I need to do. But just stalk us on social media or visit our website. You know what we're up to. Guys, thanks again for being such a great panel. I mean, waking up, for musicians to wake up at 8:30 in the morning is a task. I understand. Thank you. Much appreciated. And Alleyah, thank you once again for being such a wonderful moderator. And Sagar, shall we take it away to the performances that we're going to watch? Hidayat, look happy. It's great stuff.
You caught me.
ma pa ma ga sa sa ni sa ga sa ni sa ga ma pa ni sa ga sa ni pa ma ga sa ni sa ga ma pa sa ni pa ma ga sa ni sa ga sa ni sa ga ma pa ni sa ga sa ni pa ma ga sa ni sa ga ma pa. Her everything is shorty, know she got it. The way she look, the way she moves in our designer garments. I can't catch myself, she knows she got me tripping and falling. Ready, I'm all in, listen my darling. Hey, I say, oh my gal, you're the baddest that I ever seen. A movie star gal, I want to star with you in every scene. And this universe can't handle this, your beauty queen. And she's everything that I need. Mr. Lord, woman, you got to know if it do it, when the bad man give it to y'all. Cause you know my love ain't got no flaws at all. I can't believe I'm saying it, I'm ready to give her everything. She got me sing it. Sa, ni pa, ma ga sa ni sa ga sa ni sa ga ma pa. Ni sa ga sa ni pa ni pa ma ga sa ni sa ga ma pa. Sa, ni pa, ma ga sa ni sa ga sa ni sa ga ma pa. Ni sa ga sa ni pa ma ga sa ni sa ga ma pa. Sa, ni pa, ma ga sa ni sa ga sa ma pa. Ni sa ga sa ni pa ma ga sa ni sa ga ma pa. Sa, ni pa, ma ga sa ni sa ga sa ni sa ga ma pa. Ni sa
Thank you guys once again for this wonderful presentation, discussion, performance. You know, in the absence of the real thing, this is as good as it gets. So thank you all for being part of this. Alleyah, you know, you were wonderful. And to our audiences, this would not make sense if you didn't tune in such support for what we're doing. So stay tuned. This is the first of many, and we will see Hidayat and the team at the Royal Opera House when we go back to our old lives. But until then, stalk us on social media, and hopefully we'll see you in person really soon. Thank you very much. Have a good evening and
Thank you,
good night.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.